Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live at 11:31 a.m. on a Thursday, February 25th. Getting close to the end of the week. The charts look pretty good. We'll get to the charts. Let me take a look real quick before I even start. Yeah, it's worthwhile to look at them. I think you guys will get a kick out of them. Today's topic is three different AMM strategies. We've talked about this a lot over the last months, and it's been about a year in development since these AMM protocols started to emerge on the market. And obviously, with an ascent environment, there was uh, security vulnerabilities, and there still are today. But if you look at the data and the metrics, the quantity of them has significantly diminished, and obviously, when they do occur, they're to a larger value. But the reason they've significantly diminished is because it's software, and software builds on software, builds on software. So no doubt, as every vulnerability is found, the like Open Zeppelin provides these great libraries, and what Curve is doing with Viper rather than Solidity, it's an iterative process, and it gets better and better, and every protocol builds on every protocol, and it gets stronger and stronger. So at this point, the notion of the basic AMM is a rather solidified concept, and a rather a reliable, stable, and secure technology. You're talking about the likes of Uniswap, Curve, 1inch, Bancor, and these have just swapping trading has been, and even just storing value in a smart contract is a relatively standard practice nowadays. You get into the exotic stuff like money Legos and different protocols plugging into different protocols and stuff like what Alpha Homura is doing with leverage positions, and they recently had a breach. But one, nowadays, a lot of these protocols set aside value to, and then they were able to compensate or recover funds through partnerships with other projects, and there's insurance that's starting to be emergent. So from a risk standpoint, risk minimize is sticking with the majors, and by major, I mean basically the titans of industry that are going to emerge from this space in the coming years. And the majors are very obvious. They're the ones who started this whole thing. Uniswap, Bancor was back in 2017. They have tremendous knowledge and experience. 1inch, Kyber's up there. Sushi, obviously a fork of Uniswap that basically turned into something consumed by the corporate world. Now at FTX, so they're heading in a different direction, but they're a major. Um, that's just what's pertinent to understand with regard to considering the risks. So obviously, the second you start to depart from the majors, you have an increased risk profile. I don't even need to start listing them, but there's a whole plethora. Um, and there's also lack of a monetary policy. Well, yeah, I would say that. So they have half of what the majors have. The majors have the swapping components, so that facilitates the transaction fees. But the secondary layers, the layer two DeFi protocols, what they have is just the monetary policy, meaning they have emissions, and they have so an inflationary component and a supply disruption component, which facilitates the deflationary pressure. So, but they're missing the transaction component, which is a significant factor in really understanding and assessing the monetary policy at play. When you're talking about like 1inch and your capacity to lock 1inch tokens and receive 40% returns with yield derived from transaction fees, and those transaction fees use or purchase 1inch tokens, so that's disrupting supply. There's a constant buy pressure on 1inch tokens, and which is basically tied to the transaction volume on the platform. So as the volume on the platform increases, more 1inch is consistently purchased to distribute to the DAO stakers, the DAO participants. And clearly, the incentivized pools, the incentivized liquidity pools, is another fascinating component of the monetary policy, because that effectively creates both an inflationary and deflationary pressure, or at least it targets the inflationary pressure to the pool, thus the incentive. But by merely locking particular assets in the pool, persons are effectively disrupting circulating supply, which is a deflationary pressure. They're not liquidating, they are in the pool, which means they're not being sold. Anyway, That's my intro, sticking to it. So there's three different AMM strategies that have emerged. One of them is relatively new because of Bancor's new V21 policy protocol, and all three have different risk considerations and different significance and meaning to how you structure the portfolio. Today's episode is sponsored by Change Angel, the non-custodial swap exchange for social goods. Stop depositing on exchanges, not your keys, not your crypto, non-custodial, DeFi, or nothing at all. Bam! Let's pop it over to the main screen and see who's in the stream. Igor's in the house, always a pleasure. Squatchy's in the house. Wave, what's up? Hey Noah, this may be off topic, but I'm curious if you have a recommendation on where to ensure my LP position on Keeper Dow. Well, you're talking about was it Nexus Mutual? Um, to my understanding, they're at least the they're the lead disruptor. They have the network effect. Whether they have coverage that's available, that's another story. So, Nexus Mutual. And if they're not, if it's not available, then there's additional risk without an insurance coverage. That's the whole point of insurance. It reduces the relative degree of risk. Bear in mind, your LP position is probably on Bancor, so that means that coverage is a Bancor liquidity pool. And whether Nexus covers Bancor, I don't know. Bancor V21 is brand new, so these are new. Everything is new. Everything is emergent. Everything is evolving and is happening very quick. So the insurance protocols are do have offer a lot of coverage, and I've seen a fair amount of insurance payouts with a couple of breaches of late, but they're not extensive. It's not like you could just run into and grab a policy. See what's available, and it's always good to minimize our risk, and that is basically the focus of what we talk about almost on a daily basis at this point. Charlie G's in the house. Got that like, but hit that like button, people. 26 people in the stream, 10 likes. We can do better. Igor, Noah, can you open a connection between long-term bond yields and stocks? So there comes up. So the rising long end of the curve is indicative of a reflation narrative. The short end of the curve never bumped, well, never sold, so the bonds weren't selling, or the majority. So there's always buying and always selling, but there wasn't excessive sell pressure to drive up the yield price. And I speculate that's because banks are maybe front running stimulus. There's a variety of ways to look at it. So as the long end of the curve supports the reflation narrative along with other technical indicators, um, that basically signals to the market there's excess liquidity in the market, and that's going to put upward pressure on the markets. So it's typically correlated. So as bond yields go up, markets go up, and inflation goes up. But there comes a point where the increasing yields start to destabilize the system. Uh, Probably the best way to understand it is if the yields go too high, how the hell is the government going to pay the interest on these debts, considering tax revenue and whatever other sources of revenue they use to service those debt payments, thus the complexity and nuances of the legacy financial system emerge that are not um, not my best understanding. Persons like Rohan Gray would be able to just talk for hours on it and how money works and the legacy financial system works. But I understand the nuts and bolts, and what I look for is correlation and inverse correlation. And the biggest thing I look for is a story change when correlation flips to inverse correlation, and that's highly indicative of volatility incoming. And volatility either works to the upside or the downside. And when people are nervous and fearful, that volatility creates a significant depreciative event. And when people are greedy, clearly the direction of price action would be to the upside. It's a complicated topic, but that's what we try and talk about on here. I try to pull in the macro narrative, macro financial picture, and look at the crypto space through its lens to get a sense of where things are heading. So, I think really crypto works into the deflationary and inflationary narrative. So, and it's both correlated and inverse correlated to dollar price action, and since it's related to interest rates and of bonds, of treasuries, as well as commodity prices and other consumables, general public inflation. It's all related, and that's probably something I've said a couple of times. Everything is related. So aside from nuances and historic experience with these particular systems, with my limited knowledge, it's extensive in many regards, but it's just limited relative to what other people have, the degree of experience other people have. What I look for is correlation, inverse correlation, and story changes. And when I'm looking at technicals, I'm looking at for support and resistance, and traditional patterns. That's the name of the game. Bidders in the house, always a pleasure. Trevor, somebody while it's locking V curve. It's like a game of who can continually lock more. And that's right. There is a max supply. I'm inclined to think emissions will complete at some point, probably, I think it was a year or two or three, or maybe even four. I don't remember what they said in their um, when they released the Dow. But point being, emissions will continuously decrease as they approach max supply, and maybe they'll extend it, maybe they'll reinflate it. But the whole point is, V curve it produces an extraordinarily deflationary pressure. It's removing circulating supply in exchange for persons being able to boost their particular liquidity pool position to generate more incentivized emissions. So all of this is monetary policy. All it is inflation, deflation, and these feedback loops, um, and basically mechanisms that encourage supply disruption, while also having an inflationary component. So that's really cool. And to top it all off, we have the lending and borrowing aspect of the space, which is overwhelmingly consistent with monetary velocity and value creation, or historically a value creation process. So that's what we got going over here. We got monetary policy. We got monetary velocity. We got innovative, novel monetary policy, particularly because it's not just inflation, like, or just monetary manifestation, money creation. We also have burn components and deflationary pressures and other strategic elements that are just not either currently implemented in the legacy financial system or technologically not possible. I would lean towards probably a good mix of both. Captain's in the house, always a pleasure. Squanchy, sweet. I will check out Nexus Mutual. That's the name of the game. Heirlooms in the house, always a pleasure. All right, so there's the three AMM strategies. I wish I had like a documentation that I could show you. I should put something together at some point. But basically, you got single-sided, which is Bancor. It's the only AMM that provides single-sided exposure and permanent loss protection. And permanent loss is a misleading and hyperbolic terminology, particularly because there's actually great benefit to it, which we will get to when we talk about the second type of AMM strategy. So single side exposure of Bancor offers um, full exposure to the specific asset, which means you're going to retain the quantity of that asset according to the guidelines of their protocol. I think it's like 3 or 4 months that you have to hold on onto it in the pool to experience the full effect of the impermanent loss protection. So you'll have the same quantity of assets, and you're also going to be compensated with transaction yields, transaction fee derived yields, as well as the protocol incentivized yields. And the kicker, or the nuance to this strategy, is that you have full exposure to the asset, a fixed quantity of assets. And that means full upside, full downside. If Ethereum goes straight up and then goes straight back down, you lose out on that value. But in exchange, you have the protocol incentives and the transaction fee yield. So it's a critical part of a portfolio, and I consider it risk on. It's risk on pooling, um, and that's cool because historically you have had only the other two strategies to consider, which was basically dollar stablecoin pair and a volatile asset pairing, which is not full exposure, a full risk on position. There's a dynamic to pooling, and that dynamic means you'll have varying quantities of your principal assets in the pool, and that's meaningful. There's pros and cons to that. So Bancor has its pros and cons. It's one, it's the only AMM in the space that's capable of doing it, and they have a heck of a history and track record with regard to their experience and skill set, and they were very daring in implementing and deploying this sophisticated monetary policy implementation, and thus far, empirically in the data, we see that it is effective. We don't have excess inflation, so the incentivized emissions that are used to draw liquidity into the protocol are not debasing the value of BNT excessively because there's also a deflationary burn component. And that's quite fascinating. It's a heck of an achievement. So the second AMM protocol, I would say, is that's most important is dollar stablecoin pairing. Dollar stablecoin pairing is the risk off of an AMM position, particularly because it's going to provide the most dollar price stability, not the not, and you won't have principal asset quantity preservation. So if you pair Ethereum and DAI, you will have varying quantities of Ethereum and DAI in your pool position at any given time. It goes up and down. As the price of Ethereum goes up, you will have more DAI in the pool and vice versa. So what ultimately happens is you have a capped upside and capped downside. Let's say you have more Ethereum prices going up. There's going to be less Ethereum in the pool because people are buying it, which is taking that asset out of the pool, and the pool is going to be skewed towards DAI. But now, so your position is going to be less Ethereum, but that Ethereum is going to be more expensive. And because it's paired against a dollar stablecoin, all you need to do really is think about the volatility of one particular asset. It gets more complicated when we're talking about the double volatile asset pair, which is, I would argue, a relatively risky position. Um, and it's not something that I overwhelmingly entertain. In fact, I don't really have any double volatile asset LP positions, which is quite interesting. I'm a very risk adverse person. I see the benefit of the dollar stablecoin pair as being dollar protective, and I see the benefit of Bancor's monetary policy being asset quantity protective. When you're talking about the double volatile asset pool, you're sacrificing both. You're sacrificing the dollar volatility minimization, and you're also sacrificing dollar stability, because if both assets are volatile to the downside, you're going to have a heck of a downside slide in the dollar price point of your pool position. So that's not necessarily something I want to experience. I rather have the dollar price point stability or asset quantity stability. I mean, the stablecoin yields on Bancor are absolutely ridiculous, and your emissions are in BNT. So as the monetary policy carries out its vision and just evolves and grows and gets consumed, in theory, Bancor is a much sought after digital asset to possess, and that would drive the price up. What do you think of the Yearn Vault? It's very cool. Andre and Banteg are geniuses. They're extraordinary, and they're going to really take a lot of the the DeFi space to the next level over the coming years. Special brains, and they'll be titans of industry, and they already made hundreds of millions probably off of that one-time token mint they did for Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. So Yearn, I think, they're more aggressive. They're more like test and prod type developers, which is cool and all until you got $30 million in a smart contract and there's an exploit. So I have no qualms with that. I'm much a fan of fail fast types software development. So ramp up the velocity, and if you have an issue, fix it. So they do have to be a little bit more careful. I would say I would like to see them be a little bit more careful because of the dollar value, the dollar magnitudes that are on the line nowadays. But they have a good track record of producing some incredible smart contract products. Craig says, Noah University today. Thanks for turning me on to Block. Yeah, Block did like a 30-40% rip this morning, which is pretty cool. That's a lovely asset. I've had it for years at this point, countless years. Brendan, keep it out pool single sided. Yeah, cool, lovely. I'm not sure how to mitigate risk to the users. Superior arbitrage. So single sided pools are awesome. And if you think Rook is going to go to $10,000 a Rook, that's exactly what you want. You want a single-sided pool. So it's a risk-on position in that regard because you're going to maintain your rook quantity. It's not a variable quantity like with a double volatile or where the other AMM pair pooling. You'll have varying quantities of the pool assets and the principal assets in the pool at any given time. But with the single-sided exposure, you have 100 rook, you're going to have 100 rook in 4 months, and then 100 rook in 6 months. It's just going to have 100 rook, and that's the point of the protocol. So that is a massive plus because you're fully exposed to rook, and the same quantity of it in the single-sided pool. Um, you're also exposed to the full upside and the full downside, which is its pros and cons. Full upside is lovely, full downside not so lovely. So I'm much more a fan of the dollar stablecoin paired pooling because it reduces a lot of that volatility. I will sacrifice upside any day for muted depreciation of my principal assets. And clearly, in exchange for transaction fee yield and incentivized protocol yield, it's a very happy trade off for me. So the dollar stablecoin pools. That's what I quite enjoy. Um, William says, "How do you feel about BNT USDC?" Well, uh, bear in mind, I would much prefer it to be a double-sided pool, but I'm inclined to think you're looking at the single-sided protected pools on Bancor's DApp. So for me, that bet is not a bet. It's a decent place to allocate value. You have to weigh your risk analysis, risk considerations, how much your risk on versus risk off. So clearly, if you're putting dollars in there and your dollar quantity is protected, putting stable coins in the Bancor is a no-brainer. That's pretty awesome. And obviously, Curve is a significant part of the space as well because they're kind of like single-sided exposure, kind of has the same um, portfolio meaning or portfolio effect as Bancor because you put dollars into Curve, you're just going to grow your dollars. They deal with stable coins, and that is the net effect and net result of their protocol. Um, so, as I said, the third and most volatile of AMM positions is a double volatile pairing. Let's say Ethereum and WBTC. So if Ethereum and WBTC dip, you're going to have a significant dip in your LP dollar valuation. So you have full downside exposure in that regard, and you also have full upside exposure. So if Bitcoin and Ethereum rip to the upside, you're going to have full on exposure. But now you get into the complexity. What happens if Ethereum breaks out and Bitcoin doesn't? Now you're going to have less Ethereum in the pool and more Bitcoin. So now you have that the pool effect where one goes up, one goes down with regard to the quantity. You don't have a fixed quantity in the pool. You have a variable quantity of principal assets. Can you give an example of double-sided? I just joined, unfortunately. White Wolf, my man, how are you? So, double-sided pools are everything. Meaning that's the vast majority of the pools in the AMM space. The only protocol that has single-sided pools is Bancor, the protected pools. But Bancor also has double-sided pools. Whether they end up deprecating them or not, I don't know. But point being, uh, double-sided pools carry the considerations that I mentioned. Either you have dollar stability or dollar value volatility with the double volatile asset pool pairings, Ethereum and WBTC, as I mentioned. If one goes up and one goes down, the quantity of your assets in the pool skews in an inverse correlated way. Ethereum goes up, you have less Ethereum in the pool and more WBTC. But if Ethereum and Bitcoin both go up or both go down, your value in the pool go up and down along with it. Um, I just feel that that is a relatively risk-on position. So for myself, when I entertain it, it's suited for a relatively small percent of the portfolio. as compared to a dollar stablecoin pairing, which is going to be protective of the dollar valuations of your principal. You're going to have varying quantities of the assets in the pool. If you pool Ethereum and DAI on 1 inch, for example, and Ethereum rips to the upside, you can have less Ethereum and more DAI, but your less Ethereum is going to be worth more. So it's quite nuanced and difficult to really understand the complexity of these protocols extraordinarily well. They're brand new, and they bear no comparison whatsoever to monetary policy of legacy financial systems and sovereign countries for that matter. Anyway, so that's the name of the game. Just wanted to go over those things. I don't think there's much more. So manage risk and balance your portfolio, not taking on excessive risk and protective of it. So the protective of your gains, which means the dollar stablecoin pool pairing is going to be protective of the dollar price point. Muted upside, muted downside in exchange for platform transaction fees plus incentivized returns. And Bancor has a significant component in the portfolio as a risk-on source of revenue. With the single side exposure, it's basically the same thing as holding the asset because the quantity of your assets is not changing. So the most important thing I could probably say is there's no one particular perfect solution that say, oh, just put everything in here, because then there's also risk of value concentration to a single protocol. There's a lot of protocols out there to choose from. And if there's ever an issue with one protocol, being diversified is always your best safety net. And that's definitely also something to consider. So depending on your risk appetite, you could concentrate value in the best pool that you think um, is, there's so many to choose from, but you'll end up seeing something that you really fancy. Um, and it's not always the best thing to do to concentrate all your value. Diversify among Celsius and BlockFi. Diversify against, I mean, clearly Uniswap, but uh, they don't have incentivized pools. So, that really tickles my fancy nowadays is Curve and 1 inch and Bancor. Is that actually what I have up here? Yeah, so here's 1 inch, here's Bancor, and here's Curve, and I don't really apply value anywhere else. There's some really big whales out there making some serious money on Uniswap, but that's a much more competitive market because the value flows really to and from various pools, sometimes quickly. Um, and obviously the market's extraordinarily liquid, meaning you could pretty much buy and sell anything for reasonable amounts of slippage at any given time. Uh, and that kind of beats the pants off of anything a brokerage house in the legacy financial system can provide. Definitely not 24 hours in the old school stuff. Um, that's about it. Saw a couple of good headlines this morning talking about energy and the energy transformation. That's always good to see. Keep an eye on Simon Moores to see what he's up to and what kind of data he's seeing. But I think that this trend is only just going to continue. And, you know, sometimes I get um, disillusioned that the great value reallocation is not necessarily going to occur. And that introduces an awkward feeling because how the hell is not the case? How the hell does these markets keep going up? How is there not, some systemic failure or another? How do we not inevitably need, financial system restructuring in a relatively short period of time? It just seems that's kind of the way my mind works is really, is that the way it's going to play out? And if something seems like the better solution, the odds are it's going to happen. Um, Not that the best technology is always consumed. We know that from precedents in the crypto space. Digibyte's not consumed as compared to Bitcoin, even though it's superior technology. Oh, by the way, there's one other asset that's quite interesting for you guys to know about. It's the X token assets. These boys did some incredible work. X inch is really cool because you could go. Can you hear? Did they have X inch? Yeah, look. So you could buy X inch here. So you could take some Ethereum and buy X inch. X inch is auto compounding. If it loads. So it's an auto compounding DAO position. So you get emissions. So you get your emissions, but it auto compounds relative to the algorithms implemented in the smart contract in the protocol. So you don't have to pay the gas fee to withdraw and then the gas fee to restake. And that's made by X Token Boys. They did a great job with that. So if you accumulate enough um, 1 inch, here's a great way to get what 38% return on your money on a yearly basis. Beats the pants off 0.202% in your checking account. Eh, I think that's an obvious way to look at it. Wow, 1 inch is up to 445. Damn. Hold up. About 370 this morning. My price feeds must be messed up. Is it really 445? I got to check on that chart. Let's take a look at that chart real quick and we'll wrap this up. Let's keep those up. Last I saw was in a falling wedge. Is it still in there? It's maybe trying to break out. Yeah, I don't think it's going to get out. Look at those moving averages. It's got some serious pressure to the upside, but it is outside the wedge. That's pretty cool. But it's got to get above that 200 EMA and even the 100 SMA and the 200 SMA. And what's disconcerting is we have this. I don't know. From a technical perspective, it's disconcerting. But seriously, if they're expanding on the BSC, they're gonna use 1 inch tokens as the bridge. That's gonna provide some serious deflationary pressure as those bridged assets over to BSC create a strong deflationary pressure and disrupt the circulating supply. So this is unfortunate right here from a technical perspective. That is a bearish cross of the 100 SMA across the 200 SMA. Let's see if it skips the 200 EMA. Maybe there's something like that. That'd be pretty cool to see. But in any case, with the constant buy pressure, the incentivized liquidity pools encouraging supply disruption, and now the bridge over to BSC being another supply disruption component, I consider these assets really financial primitives. I think there's so much monetary policy in effect and so much monetary velocity in their systems that it's not destined to appreciate, but there's quite a confluence, a plethora of technical reasons to suspect that they're going to appreciate. They're in demand. They're extremely powerful. If you use 1 inch tokens to get value into another ecosystem from Ethereum over to BSC, that means they're needed. They have purpose. Uh, and anything that's purpose has purpose and is needed is going to be bought, and that's going to drive up the price. Pretty cool stuff, boys and girls. Let me check over if there's any questions, and we're going to wrap this thing up. Brendan says, so basically, single-side exposure holds the same risk as holding the asset in your wallet, but you have a chance of gaining some yield. So a little bit more than that. The first part is correct. It's the single-side exposure holds the same risk as holding the asset in your wallet, just as you say. But it's not that you have a chance of gaining yield. You will gain yield. And that the whole point of the stream is that you could use a combination of these three AMM strategies to turn your value into a salary. I mean, seriously, if you have like 100 grand, I know it's a relatively large number, but if you have 100 grand, there's no reason you can't be generating $40,000 a year of a salary, and that might actually be competitive with your actual salary. There's no reason you can't get 40% right about now with a relative degree of risk minimization. I mean, literally, just if you have 100 grand, just convert it over to put it in USDC for a month, and you're gonna be getting 30-40% on one of the curve pools, and that's all dollar denominated. So instead of trying to turn 100 grand into $10 million and putting everything on the line, reduce your risk and try and protect the principal, which I would say is best suited for dollar stablecoin pairings. Muted upside, muted downside, and the returns are quite lucrative if you explore uh, onsen on sushi. Onsen on sushi has a STF and an F pool that's putting out some serious yield, and that's pretty cool. Um, the STF is yield bearing F 2.0 brought over to F 1.0. They're basically backdating the yield that is accumulating on the beacon chain, which is incredible that they did that. Um, but that's a relatively risk minimized position because one STF really is an Ethereum in most regards, at least the price point, more or less the same, which means um, you have a relatively balanced pool. That's an interesting example of a double volatile asset pool, but because of the exact same asset, it's relatively balanced. And that's kind of like what Curve does. All the assets in the Curve pools have equal value, except the cross asset exchange component with their synthetics integration. But WBTC, RenBTC, SBTC, that's all BTC. So you put value in, you're going to get value out, and it's pretty much going to be the same exact quantity of assets. Yeah. Carlos says 1 inch just announced BSC support, so people are buying. Yeah, 1 inch and the bridge. I mentioned it earlier. Absolutely incredible. White Wolf, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Candid, hey, fuck, I'm late. Sorry. Well, the video is going to be here. You can rewind this bad boy. It's on YouTube, so you know the deal. They're always here. All right, let's wrap it up for today. 42 likes, 42 people, 23 likes. We can do better. So, as always, risk considerate, reduce your risk, generate recurring revenue streams, balance your portfolio. You can make little bets with risk on, but if you turn like $1,000 into $15,000 and you catch a lucky break, that's a massive win. You don't need to try and turn $1,000 into $10 million. There's too much risk. It's not worth the reward. 99.9% of people don't capitalize on such a pursuit, such a position. I'm not a fan of risk. I'm quite risk adverse. So again, these AMM protocols, I believe the majors are quickly becoming titans of industry. Um, some of them have corporate backing, which is what I argue is the case with 1 inch. Uniswap just has billions of dollars in their treasury at this point. They're basically, a unicorn asset unto themselves. Um, Curve is just brains, serious brains. Bancor, just serious brains, and just history, and they're just entrenched at this point. I got to keep my eye on Kyber. I got to see what they're doing from a technical perspective. The fundamentals were always strong. Incentivized supply disruption and a burn component for a fixed supply. Top it all off. There's no inflationary component to Kyber. Kyber was always a deflationary asset that only went down in max supply and circulating supply. And that's their monetary policy. So the fundamentals tell you where to look and the technicals when. Fundamentals were always there, and the technicals just have to hit. And they hit with Bancor of late, a couple 100%. Um, let's wrap it up. Brendan says, Thank you, Noah. God Vortex, always a pleasure. 12:09 p.m. on Thursday, February 25th. As always, I thank everyone for joining. I will see you tomorrow. Don't forget to tell everyone to subscribe. Catch you then. Peace.